Little Nightmares 2 is a game I have been looking forward to since I played the first part. It was promised to me that all the shortcomings of that first one will be remedied with the sequel, and that excites me. Now that I've played it from start to finish, I'm ready to discuss how much of that promise was actually fulfilled. Let's start by addressing the fact that the first game didn't support Ultrawide natively and needed a fix for it to work. I'm sad to say that there has been no improvement in that aspect whatsoever. Once a lazy developer, always a lazy developer, I guess. A disappointing start to be sure, especially when you consider that Little Nightmares 2 came out in December 2020. I can think of games which were released over 15 years ago and had native ultra-wide support. It's ridiculous. I could rant all day about it, but it's probably best if I move on. There are fixes on the internet which work great. One Google search is all it will take, or you could alternatively write me an email and I'll be happy to help as well. As we start the game, we will quickly realize that our protagonist is no longer 6. We now play as a boy. What's his name? The game won't tell you that, but a Google search will. His name is Mono. The fact that we have to Google to get basic information about our protagonist is an early red flag for me. What does make a good impression is the game's visuals as well as the music. It's all great. My wife actually watched me play and commented on how nice the game looks. She doesn't normally like to watch me play, but this game managed to attract her attention, so that speaks for itself. About half an hour into it and we meet the second character who will help us survive the horrors of this dark, twisted world. Who is she? What's her deal? We don't know yet, but she is small like us and needs help. In a place like this, having a companion is worth risking your life for, so we definitely save her and continue along together. The game is pretty vague at first, but begins opening up as we push forward. This time there's a real story presented to us. We witness some character development and even some unexpected twists. Does it answer all the questions left in the air by the first game? No, it does not. It actually presents us with a few new ones, but it does answer some of the ones that were left behind, which is an improvement. It's also the reason why I enjoyed my 8 hours playing through it much more than I did the first game. Not only is our protagonist more likable, but the gameplay is expanded upon as well. We now have combat sections which fit surprisingly well in this game. Mono is dedicated to protecting this girl he saved. He's a man on a mission, if you will. While in the first game our goal is survival for our own benefit, here our motives are, at least in part, altruistic. When the girl gets abducted, our protagonist doesn't just continue. No, he risks everything to find and save her again. I would love to talk in detail about the story here, but that would spoil it, so I'll instead move on to other aspects of the game. In terms of platforming, the game has seen some improvements as well, but unfortunately there are still some unfair jumps where you have to hope your angles aligned perfectly. It seems to be less common than the first game, so I'll forgive it, but it still happens. Another major improvement is that Mono can now simply stash keys instead of having to carry them around. In Little Nightmares 1, you had to drag these big keys around, which made you walk slowly and was mostly an annoyance. Now you can simply put them in your coat and run normally. I did mention that combat is a thing in this game. The sections that involve it are a great addition and give us relief from the constant running and hiding. However, there are some frustrations related to them as well. Take these enemies for example. They will charge you head on, but then stop just outside of your weapon's reach before lunging at you a second later. This perfectly illustrates the main problem of this game. There's a lot of gotcha moments where the player is essentially killed unfairly and taught what the game wants him to do. Pretty much everyone will assume that the charging enemy will continue to charge the first time they meet them at least. The consequence will be an early swing, which means you miss your target, and before you can raise your weapon again for another one, you will be captured and killed on the spot because Mono dies from one hit. Unfortunately, the game does this a lot, and not just when fighting. It sets traps which are either hard to see or straight out invisible, and basically kills you a few times before you learn everything and then do what the game wants. There was one chase sequence where you are supposed to use a lever, however it can go in one of two directions and the player has no way of knowing which one is the correct one. It's literally a 50-50 chance, and you will hit the right one and continue, or turn the lever in the wrong direction and then have to replay the sequence because you will get killed. These issues are not critical, but they do feel cheap and unnecessary. Let's talk about the monsters. If you ask me, those are much more original than in the first game. Most of the time, you will traverse a city which will offer several different areas with its own disfigured inhabitants. It not only makes for more interesting encounters, but also ensures that you won't get bored. Oftentimes, our protagonist will have to work with his female companion if he wants to survive, and I found that the addition of a second character was a good idea. The monsters will mostly ignore the girl and almost always focus the player, which was a good move from the developer, even if it sometimes seems strange. Imagine playing well, but having your companion break stealth. Some games allow for that, and it can be incredibly annoying because you get punished for something that you didn't do. It's not your responsibility. Well, luckily that's not the case in Little Nightmares 2, so we don't have to worry about that. Unfortunately, there's still a complete lack of voice acting if we don't count grunts and screams. It would have been great if the characters spoke to each other, but I also feel as though some people prefer it the way it is right now. At least the monsters should have spoken. They do show intelligent interactions, so not all of them are mindless ghouls. It would have been curious to hear them scream at you. Maybe the hunter is vulgar and curses a lot, while the teacher is trying to sound nice and friendly while having a demonic voice and attempting to eat you. There's so many missed opportunities here. Let's talk about the game stability. It never crashed on me, but I did experience a bug where I had to reload a checkpoint. In this scene, a locker falls on top of you and the girl gets abducted. You should be able to escape it, since it is a pre-programmed sequence, but for some reason my character failed to do it and was stuck underneath the locker permanently. At first I assumed that it was my fault and I just didn't press something or didn't understand what I'm supposed to do, but after a few minutes I relogged and found out that the scene happens automatically and it was just a bug. And here's something neutral that I wanted to show you. It only occurs because of the ultra-wide aspect which I have forced upon the game. If you pay attention to the lower right corner of the screen, you will see an enemy appear out of nowhere. Devs like to use these kind of things as an excuse for not implementing these ultra-wide resolutions, but it's nonsense. I'm showing this to demonstrate that it's not a big deal and that I am clearly not blaming the developers for this. If ultra-wide causes me to see some things I was generally not intended to see, I can live with it, and I know everyone else can too. Make it an option and simply add a warning that the player may see more than was intended, but let me make that choice. Don't just take it away from me. I just really want to demonstrate what the worst effects are of using ultra-wide in a game that wasn't designed with it in mind. And as you can see, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot more I could say about this game, but sadly it's all within spoiler territory, so I can't. My friend who recommended the game to me promised that this second installment will answer all of the questions the first one left in the air and improve upon it greatly. I have to say that most of that turned out to be true. The game is better in every conceivable way, both in terms of gameplay and storytelling, and really did answer some of the questions. Not all of them, mind you, but some. And that's a good indication of where the series is headed. We will surely find out more about this twisted world in the next games, and I'm looking forward to it. It took me around 8 hours to play through Little Nightmares 2, which is about as much as I played the first game when we also count the time I spent on the DLCs there. 8 hours is a solid playtime, and I feel like it's more than worth the demanded $30. If you are unsure and are considering it, I can definitely recommend that you do play this game. Little Nightmares 2 is not scary and only featured a single jump scare, which I found a bit annoying. They could have easily gone without it, but I'll forgive it. Jump scares are a cheap way of inducing fear, and it's not really fear, you're just startling the player. It's not something that I appreciate. I think it's just lame. If you want to make a scary game, make a scary game. Don't just, don't plant some bullshit and try to catch me off guard. It's yet another example of this whole gotcha attitude. But other than that, the game looks great, has a good story, which when you consider the first one is a huge improvement, and even features a short secret ending if you can be bothered to find all the collectibles. Everyone else can simply check it out on YouTube. I know I did. I mean, I just don't want to play the game again. It's not a bad game, but it doesn't have enough replayability for me. So give it a shot. I know you won't regret it. This is the point where I thank you for watching my review of Little Nightmares 2. I hope it was informative and would love to see you on the next one. Until then, have a great day. This is Nino signing off.